Welcome to another episode of Rich Dad Stockcast. I'm your host, Denney, and today we're back for part 2 of one of our most talked about episodes, what Andy Tanner learned firsthand from Robert and Kim Kiyosaki about building real lasting wealth. Now, in part 1, we talked about mindset, education, the real rules of money that the rich live by. But today we're digging a little bit deeper. We're going to go into those lessons, how they shaped Andy's investing philosophy, how they play out in real life, what they mean for your future. And if you're serious about applying this to your own life, don't forget to go to stockcastbonus.com right now. We've put together some free tools to help you take control of your financial future. That's stockcastbonus.com. Back again with me is Rich Dad expert Andy Tanner. Andy, welcome back to the show.
Del, thanks for having me. I love these conversations. Robert Kiyosaki and Kim Kiyosaki, they have a tremendous legacy, and it is such an honor and a privilege to disseminate that, to share what I've learned from those guys, because it's life-changing. The mission doesn't change to elevate your well-being. You're part of humanity. That includes everyone watching. And to elevate the financial well-being of humanity is what we're here to do. So, and they're the best at it. They're the best.
Indeed. And speaking of elevating our education, stockcastbonus.com, our listeners receive some amazing things in there. What do they receive when they go there?
Yeah, if you haven't got your free downloads and your free ebooks, all that stuff's waiting for you at stockcastbonus.com. Great for habit forming, great for a blueprint, great to map out what you want to do. It's difficult in a podcast or something to really build a comprehensive wealth building plan. And so to organize that information, go to stockcastbonus.com. There's numbers that'll change your life. There's things that'll change your life there. And many of the resources we have there are free. So go check them out.
There we go. Now, last episode, we talked about the foundational lessons from Robert and Kim Kiyosaki. Now, I heard this long ago, and I it's so true. Whenever you give a presentation, there's actually 3 presentations you give. There's the one that you prepare for, there's the one that you give, and the one that you wish you would have gave, right? I'm sure when we were done with our last podcast, you're thinking, man, I wish I would have said this story or that story. So I'm going to give you open rein here. What's something that comes to mind about Robert or Kim Kiyosaki that you want to tell our listeners that might help them on your journey to financial independence, on your journey to wealth building, stock trading?
When we did the part 1 where you asked some of these same questions, the problem is, as I said, well, how much hard drive space do we have? I traveled for 14 years all over the world with those guys, and I still learn from them today. And there's just not enough time. That's the problem, is we could just forever. And it's really nice because I speak to my sons a lot about it. But last time, we talked about spirit. There's another really important lesson that I think is way big for people to get. Robert is a master. And I don't use that term lightly. He is a master of understanding context. And he is defiant almost. Well, no, not almost. He defies those that only have content. And every single time he teaches, he works on people's context, not the content. And, he uses a metaphor of some fruit in a bowl, maybe. You've got a fruit bowl and you got grapes and bananas and oranges, but without the bowl, they just roll around or fall out, right? There's nothing to hold their shape. The other way to teach this that I think is really unsurpassed is biblical. And it's the parable of the sower. If I take an apple, if I just pull an apple off a tree and I crack it open, and I look in the core and I see those seeds, the genetic material in those seeds is usually viable. You've heard this, well, he's a bad seed. There's not very many bad seeds. Most seeds are viable. They've just evolved to where they're just really effective. So, looking at the apple seed isn't where the success would come because it's built in. The content is good. We don't need to convince anyone of that. But in the parable of the sower, he throws these seeds, and some of them land on stony ground, and some of them land on weedy ground and shallow ground. And for whatever reason, whether it be no roots or the birds eating them or getting choked out by weeds, for whatever reason, none of the seeds make it. So here's good seeds, viable seeds, truth, true things that are real seeds, real perfection that can grow, but the ground doesn't work. So when someone might want to talk about a hamburger, I would prefer to talk about how hungry someone is, if that makes sense. It's where the burger's going to go. If I'm not hungry, then there's no place for it, right? If you go to the farm, how much time do they spend on the seeds? I mean, I guess someone in a lab might genetically change them, but on the actual farm, it's all about the ground. It's about making sure the ground is fertile, aerated, ready, water cared for to where the ground is it. So Robert teaches context, which is the environment that I place myself in and the mindset where I can receive seeds, because most people don't receive the seeds. So he's a master of context. Whenever he walks into a room and takes the stage, he just it's like he's got this special superpower to understand where people are and to open up their minds in terms and what we call it set the context. So if a person doesn't have fruit, doesn't have a harvest, it's probably not because there aren't great seeds around. It's because the personal cultivation hasn't happened yet. And if people come to a program like this, they want seeds. They want, say, give me a stock pick. It doesn't help them. It doesn't make them any smarter to get a stock pick, right?
That's huge right there. I already love how we're starting this. Now, taking it to a personal nature, I'm sure Robert and Kim had to cultivate the soil in your brain a little bit every now and then. I know they have for me. Can you tell me a time where Robert or Kim maybe, I don't want to say course corrected, but said, hey, here's a little prodding, think a little bit bigger?
There's no shyness in course correcting, none at all. Robert taught me how to be a different type of teacher. I was a good teacher. I was naturally good. My father was a teacher. My father was a great public speaker, and I grew up. He was the leader of the church congregation, so I'd watch him at the pulpit all the time, and I revered him for his eloquence and he could inspire people. So I was just being brought up. I was a good speaker. But Robert took me to a whole new level and talk about course correction. One of the things that I used to do was give speeches that were very organized and pre-planned. And the problem with that is the speech I prepared might not be what that particular group would be best served by, because I hadn't met them yet and I wasn't in the room yet. So, Blair Singer is really good at facilitation, and they're really good at finding out what the room needs and then giving the room what they want. And just almost like, I don't want to call it like whose line is it anyway, but you know how they have that show where they go, okay, go do this. Then you get on, and it's impromptu. And I remember, I'll tell you a little thing, and I wanted to kill Robert. I mean, this was such a horrible thing to do to another human being. And yet at the same time, it was a beautiful thing to do to a human being. So I probably loved him and hated him in this moment as much as any other. Is we were in Australia, and I had a really good speech I was given around, and I get a standing ovation out of it, which was for me, not for the people. I was thinking about it the wrong way, and I knew how to do it. And I had honed this particular presentation over years, and it was just effective because I'd honed it in. And I had PowerPoints and charts and graphs and all this stuff. So we're in Australia, and I don't remember how big the crowd was, but it was an arena. So think, Maverick Center, think Delta Center, think that size. And so I don't know how many people were there, but it was an arena. And I'm about to go on stage. And Robert comes up to me, and I'm not kidding. It's less than 60 seconds before I'm going to go out there. And he comes up to me, goes, "I hate your presentation. It sucks." I says, "What?" Just blindsided, like out of nowhere. He goes, "Yeah," he said, "I told the guys in the booth that if they put your PowerPoint up, I was going to fire them or, go after them or whatever." So I'm tired of that, and just go out and teach them what they need to know and what you know. Just go draw it on the flip chart. And so I got 4 markers. I got a black marker, a red, a green, a blue. I got 4 markers and an easel with blank paper on it. And my, however long my speech was, I don't remember, but I got nothing. And my whole speech was dependent on the charts that I was going to show, the data that I was going to share. And I got none of it to show. And it really pissed me off. I mean, because now it's 50, I got 45 seconds, and my wife, Robert, walks away. And my wife comes up to me. She sees I'm mortified, and she says, "What just happened? You don't look happy." I said, "Man, I said some bad words and whatever." And so the next thing you know, I was out there, and I gave about a C- presentation. It wasn't that great, but I did it. And I did it off the cuff, and I did it. And all of a sudden I realized, okay, these are my new tools. This is a new approach. And from that day on, I stopped preparing a speech and started preparing to speak. There's a difference. I stopped preparing speeches and prepared myself to speak and to listen. And it changed, as a teacher, that changed my life. And I'm in debt for him for awful to do to me. Awful, but that's a course correction, right? And another thing where he would chew me out, and he literally chewed me out on this once, because he just would demand to be the best teachers we could possibly be. It wasn't enough to just say we've arrived. You had to keep pushing yourself in your comfort zone all the time. But the number one critique he would give me most that would drive him crazy is he'd say, "Andy, you get so small." I'm like, "Small? I'm 6'8", man. I'm 900 pounds here. I'm a gorilla. I'm the 800-pound gorilla in the room. If you hadn't noticed, he's here. I'm it, right? Rah rah. And he said, "Andy, don't get small on me. You got to keep the big picture in mind." He was so good at context and seeing big that he wouldn't get lost in detail. He hates detail. And the devil's in the details, but you also can't see the forest for the trees. If you get into a pine needle, you miss the whole forest. So just so many non-money things they're not, they're all about money, but they're contextual rather than content, if that makes sense. So yeah, there's been plenty of course corrections, I'll tell you that. No question.
I love, and I think that's what this episode is about. It's what are the things that we're not reading in Rich Dad Poor Dad that Robert has truly taught you. But I want to go, speaking of money things. Robert and Kim are traditionally known for real estate, but what did they teach you or challenge you about when it came to investing in the stock market? You have such a big stock background, but what did they teach you about stock and trading and psychology?
Well, I had a pretty good background in equities before. That's why they asked me to give the speech the first time. But what I really learned about from Robert money wise was macroeconomics, monetary. I didn't understand monetary policy till I met him. And I didn't understand debt really well. I didn't understand currencies. He changed my whole thought about how short positions work. The best speech I ever heard him give was just, man, it's the best I've ever seen him. I mean, he just was so good. It was on a cruise ship with the real estate guys, Bob Helms. And there were people would go on this investing cruise, and it wasn't a huge crowd. It was on a boat, so it was limited. And so I can't remember how many people were in the room, but it was one of the smaller rooms we'd done. And Robert and I and the other guys had been invited to come speak and give speeches in this investing cruise, this summit at sea that they did every year before COVID. And Robert gave this talk called "Don't Fight the Fed, Be the Fed." He said, "Don't abolish the Fed." Now, Griffin, right, was there, who wrote the Creature from Jekyll Island. He was there too, and he'd spoken the day before, and his speech was called "Abolish the Fed," and that was one view. Robert came out the next day, and he told us his speech was called "Be the Fed, Be the Fed, Print Money, Learn to Print Money." It's the best I've ever. It was such a great take to have G. Edward Griffin on one side, who's a Fed expert, Robert on the other side, benefiting from it, and G. Edward Griffin's view is this is a horrible, evil thing. Robert's like, no, it's just how you're positioned. It can fill your pockets with cash if you be the Fed. And so he taught me so much about macroeconomics, and he got me interested in studying it on my own. We would study pretty heavy stuff, and it developed a habit where with my own team we study. And it just gave me a model for leadership for my own team at the Cashflow Academy on how we should study. And how, it just goes on and on. Taught me context, taught me how to study, taught me a different style of how to be a teacher, taught me huge lessons in macroeconomics, and just opened that window up. The grunch of giants from Buckminster Fuller, learning about the grunch. And that's the grand universal cash heist. And just incredible window into the ultra wealthy and how they operate. It really, really interesting stuff. So there's just forever precession, ephemeralization, what unity is. Really good stuff.
Well, let's do this. Let's dig in a little bit more, but let's first go to break. And I want to come back to that. So we're talking with Andy Tanner about the real life wealth lessons he learned directly from Robert and Kim Kiyosaki. These aren't just ideas from the book. These are principles Andy has lived by and applied. So when we come back, we're going to zoom in on how you can use those same lessons to change your financial trajectory, no matter where you're starting from. Stick around. We'll be right back.
So far, it's been great. I needed a source where I could really enrich my education through stocks. I didn't really have an avenue for it, and it's helped me a lot. The simplicity has really gotten me on the track to where I enjoy the learning as well as it's really solidifying in my mind. And like, they're not just trying to sell you something, they really care about the people that are in the course, and they really do care about you and your personal goals, and what you want to do is to help you and your family and whatever your goals are in life through that. So it's really been great.
Welcome back to Rich Dad Stockcast. We're talking with Andy Tanner about the wealth building wisdom passed directly from Robert and Kim Kiyosaki. Now, we're going to focus on how you can apply these lessons in real life. Now, I want to go back to the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think that started all for us. I know for you, for me, I love that book so much. It's such a great book. Now, there's other lessons that you've received from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the book itself. Let's dig into that a little bit. So speaking of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert has taught you in person, but also through his texts as well. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's funny. Most people have a great shift in their context and an ignition of their spirit when they read it, but they really don't. They remember what happened and how they felt, but they really don't remember the content of the book very well. Same with the 7 Habits. One of the fun games I used to play is I'd take a stage back when I used to enjoy speaking. Now I like it here. I like doing it this way. No airports, no hotels. But in my younger days where I traveled the world, I would go out on a stage and there'd be a zillion people out there, and I'd say, how many have read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Everyone raised their hand, self-help group. Oh, yeah. Did you like it? Oh, loved it. Would you recommend it? Oh, I'd recommend it. Life-changing. And I'd say, okay, here's $100. Who can name the 7 habits? And in 30 years, I never had anyone that could name all 7.
Crickets.
And so I could, and I do the same thing with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. What are the 6 lessons? I mean, right now, if you're listening to this podcast, could you list the 6 lessons? Yes or no? Astounding, right? Astounding. The first is the rich don't work for money. That's sandwiched with the rich work to learn. And inside that, you got why I teach financial education and taxes and corporations. You got all that stuff in between, but it's the context that changes you. The other thing about Rich Dad, Poor Dad is I've learned from it. I grew up, my father was the leader of our congregation. So I grew up in the scriptures, heavy duty. And it was interesting is through my life, we would do encore reading, meaning we would read them over and over and over again. Most books in my life, I read once. But you'll find if you read a book more than once, you'll get different angles, different takes, different insights as you study it. And so, with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, someone might read it and say, now that's a book on assets and liabilities. And someone else might read it and say, that's a book on mentorship. And the second insight is bigger than the first, because a person that understands the secret wasn't learning assets and liabilities. The secret was learning how to find someone to teach it to you. Having a rich dad in your life, was it because of what he knew or because of who he knew? And we all have had a journey. Robert started his Velcro wallet business. He has a fascinating life. Went to the Merchant Marine Academy, worked for Xerox and developed sales skills. Failed as an entrepreneur making Velcro wallets, got licenses from like Duran Duran and Van Halen to put their logos on his wallets. I mean, he's just had a real interesting life of like anyone else, successes and failures. But that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, teaches cash flow. And if you want to move away from context into content, not to get small, understanding a financial statement and how cash flows is a big deal. And this is really important. The reason, in my opinion, Rich Dad, Poor Dad got as big as it has was he was able to teach with arrows as opposed to numbers, because cash moves. And so what he did in that book is he taught people how cash flowed. There's no numbers that I can really think of per se in those boxes. Mostly it's arrows. Now imagine that as a father, how I could teach my sons before they knew how to count. Before they knew how to add or subtract, they knew innately it became a part of how they thought, is they knew how the cash flow worked. And this is very important. We just did a podcast, you and I, on AI. And the idea, if you really want to unlock where to position yourself, see where the cash flows. The cash flows from the pockets of consumers to producers. That's where it flows. So be a producer, and the way to be a producer is own equity and receive cash flow, receive dividends, or own real estate and receive rents. But cash flow is so important because the buy low, sell high guys always lose their asset in the end. And they always trade what's more valuable for what's least valuable. The money isn't what is valuable. The asset, the golden goose there's your reference. The golden goose is more valuable than the golden egg. It just is. It just is. And the reason people get excited is because it lays golden eggs. But the more valuable thing is the machine that lays the golden egg. The golden egg is valuable, but it's not as valuable as the asset is. So when you buy low and sell high, or you flip a house, you always end up in the end with no asset and with cash that needs to be spent and depleted. So having an engine and shifting a mindset to cash flow from capital gain, that's among one of the greatest lessons that anyone can learn ever. And Warren Buffett agrees. He says the most important number in the GAAP total, the generally accepted accounting principles total, the most important number is operational earnings. Earnings from what we do, not from the value increase of our company. The earnings from the work that we do, the operational earnings, the cash flowing to us from what we do, is the most important number to an investor by far. Cash flow is it. And you learn that in the cash flow game. So it was pretty good.
There we go. And listeners, if you're new here, you probably saw a smile on our face when Andy mentioned the golden goose. We're always referencing that. It's kind of an inside joke. So if you're with us, throw in a golden goose, an egg emoji in the comments. We always like to do that. It's kind of a funny little thing that we do. But let me ask you this. So my final question is, if someone wants to go beyond reading and start doing, what should they focus on this week?
Well, we always plug cashflowbonus.com on the podcast. There's a great ebook we have there that they can download that talks about how cash flow works and 6 numbers you can learn about to completely change your life and change your wealth plan. And we have access to calculators that people can use to project things and find out, where they sit and what they'd have to do to achieve a goal. One of the problems with a 401k is that you kind of get in it without any idea of where it's going to take you. You just do it. And we don't like that. So we help people find destinations and plan it out. There's so many resources there. So that's a great place to always begin after a podcast. If these types of conversations pique your interest and then you want to get into something that's very organized and move you along, that's a great starting place is stockcastbonus.com.
There we go. I love it. That's a great way to end our episode today. Now, listeners, think about this. Just one conversation with the right mentor can change everything. And that's exactly what Andy shared with us today. A look inside the real unfiltered lessons from Robert and Kim Kiyosaki that most people never really hear. But, if you're ready to take control of your own financial future, just like Andy said, go to stockcastbonus.com right now. You'll get access to free tools and training that can help you to start thinking and investing like the rich. And if today's episode sparked something for you, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment with an egg emoji, share this with someone who needs to hear it. You're not here by accident. You're building something that most people won't. So stay smart, stay invested, and we'll see you on the next episode.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.